Morning brewers, it's a horrible, wet, cold Easter Monday here in England, so I'm brewing. Sorry that I haven't put any videos up for quite some time. Life just got a bit difficult and complicated. I have been brewing, I've been making videos, but I'm back. And we're making a video this morning, and this morning we're having a go at reiterated mashing, which is where you do one mash, take the grain basket out, mash straight back into your first mash. So I've got my first mash ready to go. It's an overall about 8 kilogram mash. I split it into 2 fours, small pipe working there, mash temperature ready to go. So I'm going to mash in my first ordinary mash, and then I'll come back and talk about the reiterated mashing and what I'm trying to achieve. Okay, let's get mashing in. Okay, I've got mashed in, so let's talk about what's going on. So this is Greg Hughes' vanilla bourbon stout recipe. It would be about an 8 kilogram grain bill, and you could fit that in the Grainfather in one mash. The problem is I find that my efficiency really plummets as you get towards about 8 kilograms of grain. So I've decided to split it into 2, about grain bill, which would be about 4 kilograms each. Use the small pipe work. David Heath did this in his video on reiterated mashing as well, and Grainfather, I've done a video on reiterated mashing too. You do it mainly if your grain bill is too big for your vessel, or perhaps like this you want to push your efficiency up. What I haven't learned from those videos is exactly what profile to use for water, how does it affect your mash pH when you mash back in again. And what volumes you use for sparging at different stages. So that's what I'm going to experiment with and feed back to you. So the way I've set it up, what I'm going to do is, in doing my first mash, I've adjusted this water as if it was just a 4 kilogram mash, so that for my water profile that is diluted with a bit of reverse osmosis water, added a bit of calcium chloride, that's all I've had to do there. Sparge water heater over here. I'm preparing the amount of sparge water that you would use for an 8 kilogram mash batch, and I have heated it to mash temperature for the time being, and just adjusted the pH to 5.5 as I always would do for sparge water. So what I'm going to do is do my first mash, lift the grain basket, and then sparge with mash temperature water to get back to the starting volume for a 4 kilogram mash, which is about 13 litres. Do my second mash, sparge to the boil volume and see what happens. So in a few minutes I'll test the pH of this first batch to give us a base reading, and then we'll see what happens when we mash in the second time. Okay, so back shortly with pH reading then. Right, let's have a look at the pH of the first mash. I was aiming for 5.5. I have been finding with my mashing recently that my pH has been lower than I've been aiming for, whereas it used to be spot on. I'm wondering if my base water has changed, and I may have to check that if I can. So 5.4, 5.36, 5.3. So a bit lower than I was aiming for really, as I've been finding. So that just means I need to check my water. Maybe the residual alkalinity is not as harsh as it used to be. My water company only update their detailed water reports about once a year, so I might have to splash out on a more elaborate testing kit if I want to really understand what's going on. So, we'll see what happens with the second mash. I'll be back shortly when the first mash is finished. We'll do some sparging and then we'll mash in the second batch. So we're approaching the end of the first mash now, and you can see that that's cleaned up really nicely. I don't know if you can see the brackets there through the nice clear wort. So I'll lift that and we'll see what volumes we get in the sparge and mash the next one in. Back in a second. Okay, so we've reached the end of the first mash. I've mashed for an hour. I don't know that you would really need to mash for a full hour using this technique, but let's do that anyway. So turn my pump off. Now, I know from experience that I generally lose about 700 ml of wort for each kilogram of grist that's retained in the grain. So I'm expecting to have to replace that volume in order to get back to my 13 litre mash volume for this grain bill. Let's let it drain. That equates to about 2.5 litres of sparge. So according to my maths, if I sparge with 2.5 litres, I should be back to 13 litres, and then I can clean out the basket and mash in again. So I'll get on with the sparge. I'll sparge with 2.5, and then I'll come back and tell you what happened. Okay, so I sparged with 2.5 litres of water. The time the grain basket had more or less finished dripping, or the dripping was quite slow, I was at 13 litres in the Grainfather, so my maths worked out. I did that just so that we know what's going on. You could just visually watch and sparge until you get the volume that you want to mash back into. So I've got 13 litres in here. I was sparging at mash temperature water, so I'm still at mash temperature. So now we're going to mash in the second batch of grain, the second half. I'll get that done, let it settle down, and we'll just have a look at pH and consistency and things like that. Okay, so let's get mashed in, and then I'll be back shortly. Okay, so I got the second batch mashed in, all good. It seems to be circulating fine. I'll just turn off the pump. Watch the overflow pipe, watch the overflow top here. You can see that very quickly that top emerges from the wort levels dropping. That tells me that the wort's circulating through the grain bed quite happily, and if you ever worry that you've got a stuck sparge, just do that, turn it off and watch and see whether the level of the grain drops through the grain bed. If it does, then all's good. It should be circulating through the centre like that. That's what helps keep your temperature steady. So let's take a sample out, and I'll cool this, and then we will see what's going on with the pH. Okay, I've taken a sample about 15 minutes into the mash. So let's see what's happening with the pH. Stopped at 5.13, so that means the pH has dropped when I put the extra grain bill in, which you would expect it would in a way, because the grain itself can buffer down and lower the pH. So it's a bit low really, still be alright I think, but it's a long way away from the 5.5 which the first batch was close to. So you need to factor that in if you are doing a reiterated mash, I think, and based on this experience, that your second batch of mash is going to lower the pH a bit further. How much and how to calculate that I'm not sure, but in my case it's dropped it by 0.3. Okay, we've reached the end of the boil, and I happen to have got 24 litres according to the refractometer. It's at 1070. I was shooting for 1075, so I'm 5 points short. Assuming that I'll lose a litre in the chilling etc and get 23 litres at 1070, that gives me a brew house efficiency of about 74%, whereas with 4 kilogram grain bills, straightforward 4 kilogram grain bill, I'd be looking at well over 80%. So although I've got a better efficiency than I would have got with an 8 kilogram grain bill, it's not as good as I would have got with a 4 kilogram grain bill, if you see what I mean. So yeah, it pushes up your efficiency, but from now on, if I do reiterated mashing, I'll be dialing in an efficiency nearer to the 73-74% that I found in practice rather than the 82-83%. I designed the recipe at 80% efficiency. I thought I might get 80 with reiterated mashing, but I haven't. So I think 74-75% brew house efficiency is probably more realistic. It's hard to say, isn't it? Because, you know, unless I've brewed this recipe as an 8 kilogram grain bill, we don't know exactly how the two methods compare. And when I talk about 83-84% efficiency on a 4 kilogram grain bill, that's a simple grain bill of mostly pale malt. Whereas this has got pale malt, chocolate malt, brown malt, Vienna malt, and some crystal malt. So, you know, I'm not sure exactly what efficiency I would have got on that recipe anyway. Anyway, I'm at 74% brew house efficiency. I'm going to add about 300 grams of malt extract while the water's still hot to get me up to my target of 75. And then I'll get it into the fermenter, so I'll just sum up when I'm in the fermenter. Okay, back shortly. Okay, so it's 24 hours later now. Let's do a summary of where I've got to. This is the beer that we brewed yesterday, and it's turned into a bit of a monster, as you can see. It's just blown out the blow-off tube, it's crawling out of the top of the bucket, it's putting beer all over the shelf. I'm going to have right clear up to do, but that's one crazy happy yeast. So that's working well. As for reiterated brewing, what I found at the end of the day was I was about 7 points short of my starting gravity. I was going for 1075, I was nearer to 1068. I designed the recipe at 80% efficiency because when I'm brewing at 4 kilogram batches I'm getting 85% efficiency usually, so I thought 80 should be something to shoot at, but that was too ambitious obviously for that process that I just tried. So my efficiency was nearer 70%. Now David Heath in his video got 95% brew house efficiency. I've never got close to that even with a single mash brew. He does recommend that you use a fine mill, of course, if you want to push your efficiency up. He also stirred his mash every 20 minutes, which I didn't do. So my summary thoughts are, I mean, if you want to brew a big beer, you've only got two options really: boil off the volume down so that you concentrate your beer, or do reiterated mashing. Both of them take a bit more time, but with the boil off method you're not getting a full batch of beer. With the reiterated method you are, and it's adding an hour to your brew day for that second mash. So I think reiterated brewing is something to explore further. I'm quite keen to move on into imperial stouts and try brewing some really big beers, so I'll be doing this again. Things to think about: the crush of the grain, I'm not in control of that. At the moment I don't crush my own grain, so I've got to go with what I've got. So I probably would design at 65% efficiency even. I've said before, I'm not too worried what my efficiency is, as long as I know what it is, so I end up with what I need. So for, you know, 10% beer I'd be looking at an 11 kilogram brew, probably at that sort of level of efficiency. So that's what I'll be aiming for next time. Other things you can try, if you can't adjust the grain crush, I could try stirring the mash as we go through, see if that pushes it up. I could try a bigger first sparge, see if that helps. You could split your grain differently and put all of your special malts that perhaps don't contribute to the final gravity so much in the first mash, and have your gravity contributing grains in the second mash that's going to get a bigger sparge. But all in all, I think it's a technique worth exploring. You know, I'm not put off by this. I just topped mine up with a bit of dried malt extract to get to where I needed to be. Didn't need to use very much, and the beer's healthy and working, as you can see. I'm going to let that settle down a bit, then I'll have a good clean up, and then I intend to leave this to mature for a long time. So I'll let you know how that turns out. So I hope you found that of some use. It's just, you know, another counterbalance to some of the other videos out there on reiterated mashing. I think it just takes some technique to dial in. It's a new technique, but have a go at it. I'll certainly be trying it again. Okay, bye for now and happy brewing.